Watch Dogs Legion is literally right around the corner, and it feels like it's been so long. With delay after delay, we are finally so close to being able to play it. So today, it is time for the final decision. Which game is better, Watch Dogs 1 or Watch Dogs 2? Let's get into it. So a few things that I had on the topic of gameplay. Driving feels so different between both games, and this is a really important factor because the driving around, just listening to music, not even playing the missions, not even going through the actual game, just messing around, just doing whatever, is probably a majority of my hours on both games. So how the driving feels is extremely important to me. The cars in Watch Dogs 2 feel really light to drive, but they also have a more varied driving style from car to car, whereas in Watch Dogs 1 it was just slow and fast pretty much. In fact, the driving is so different in both games that coming from playing Watch Dogs 1 for a few months and then going over to Watch Dogs 2 again just feels like it honestly felt like my controller was broken. I think they're both good in their own way, but it does take a little bit to adjust coming from one game to the other. General movement and just how the flow of the game feels a lot smoother in the second game, with obviously parkour being majorly improved on and being a really big focus for Marcus's character in this game. Generally things like opening menus and going through the menus and trying to execute hacks, sneaking around, pulling out weapons feels generally a lot smoother in the second game. As far as gunplay goes, Watch Dogs 1 definitely had better gunplay in my opinion. It just felt more real and had more weight to it. Watch Dogs 2 just felt like this weird mix of lethal and non-lethal, and I think it really would have benefited them if they would have leaned more into the non-lethal for Watch Dogs 2 in general. Just cut out all the lethal guns and you could create some really creative weapons and gadgets and things of that nature, which a lot of the stuff that we've seen from Legion looks really cool, and I think it would have been really cool for Watch Dogs 2, but maybe, Watch Dogs 2 is kind of like that transition stepping stone to Legion. Guns like the air shotgun and the paintball rifle were I really like those, and the stun sniper, I like those guns. Those are probably my favorite ones to use in general because they were just fun to use. Originally, this was going to be a part of the gameplay category, but the fact that hacking is such an integral part of both games, I decided to compare them separately. The first thing that I will say is the blackout hack is definitely not as good in the second game as it is in the first game, which kind of makes sense, kind of fits the theme. I think the general hack like the steam pipe explosion and traffic lights are a lot more refined in the second game, and I really like the addition of hacks like the one where you can call the police or gangs on a random NPC or even gang members, which just creates a really interesting situation. I think it's really cool, and it just adds more to be able to do when you're just messing around, not really taking the game too seriously. But it's also useful in missions where you want to use it tactically, and it just adds to the ability to choose the way you want to play missions. Speaking of that, generally there are two ways to play missions. You can either be subtle and stealthy or upfront and carefree. A good example of this would be Wrench's mission in the end of Watch Dogs 2, where he breaks into the place and he has the grenade launcher and he's just blowing everything up, versus Marcus's mission where he's dropping down to break into Thrust's house and he's playing the Don't Sweat the Technique song and he's just sneaking around. Obviously you can play that mission however you want to play it, but the way Ubisoft advertise it, that's how, you're sneaking around, you're going on cranes and stuff. And with the addition of remote tools like the drone and RC jumper, this just adds flexibility of how you want to complete the mission. Some of them you can complete without ever stepping foot inside the mission area. The drone is also really helpful to be able to scout ahead if you plan on actually going into the area to give you a better tactical advantage. And overall, I will have to give the hacks to the second game just because of how many options there are, how many things you can do. Just the flexibility to be able to just do whatever you want is much better in the second game. As far as the soundtrack goes, the soundtrack of the first game is definitely a lot darker and fits the theme of the game very well, but it's not good music to just be listening to, as compared to the soundtrack of the second game, which could actually be listened to outside of the game. I frequently listen to that soundtrack. It's actually produced by Hudson Mohawk, and it's actually nice music. the first game soundtrack is more ambient music that goes with the story. It's like do 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 do. It's like really dark. Only time I've ever actually used it is looking up music for videos about Watch Dogs 1. And don't get me wrong, there are some good songs like the police chase music, which I actually use in my videos quite a bit, from Watch Dogs 1, from the Watch Dogs 1 soundtrack. Now on to the actual in-game radio. I think the songs are picked very well for both games and fit the overall theme and mood of the game. This is a really, really hard one because I love a lot of the songs from both games, but I think I'm going to give the slight edge to Watch Dogs 2. Just the vibe you get driving around San Francisco, messing with NPCs, listening to music, hearing the muffled songs from cars passing by, just walking around, hearing the ambient noise. It is a really, really great experience, but it's so slight. I love the in-game radio from both games. I've logged so many hours just on multiplayer for both games, and I can say that the multiplayer is just so much better in the second game. Just like the hacking and amount of hacks that you have, there's just so much more that you can do in the second game after you complete the story. And if you're not one to beat a game multiple times, there's just so many more things that you can do as far as multiplayer and co-op goes. I definitely haven't played the first game's multiplayer as much. Hacking invasions are definitely fun, but I find myself having more fun with the second game's hacking invasions and multiplayer in general, with the addition of the drone and the RC jumper. I feel like those two things, while they are small parts of the game, they add so much value to it, and just being able to just mess around with friends. The amount of cars, the silly cars, the DedSec self-driving car, that one was really fun, the Cyberdriver car. So I'm gonna have to give this one to the second game. Now, I always hear a lot of people talk about how they don't like how dark the first game is and how dark Aiden is, but I really think it's cool. We actually get a personal reason for the driving force of the story in this game, which it really feels nice playing as someone who feels like they have a goal, as opposed to Watch Dogs 2, which I don't really have a connection to Marcus. And spoilers coming up, so if you haven't played the first and second game and you don't want spoilers, then click off this video or skip like 20 seconds. But in my opinion, this was one of the reasons why Horatio's death really didn't have as much weight as Clara's death. Another reason being is that we barely got any time with him. There was like one mission with him, the noodle mission, and in general the second game just felt a lot less personal, carries a lot less weight. And yes, we do know about Marcus, we know about his personality. He's a nerd, he's into this, he's a home domain hacker, but we don't know much about his past. We don't know much about his family life. Where does he come from? I think he's from Oakland. Pretty sure he's from Oakland. And another thing I will say is Dushan was literally the worst villain ever. I hated him. I mean, hated him as in, he's a villain, obviously, but also he just wasn't good. Compare Dushan to someone like Lucky Quinn and Iraq. Iraq was one of my favorite villains in all of gaming. It just felt so real, he felt like an actual character. Dushan was just like, oh, they go and arrest him after. Oh, okay. But what happens with Iraq when you sneak into Rossi Fremont? He's you're trying to get all the data, and then he busts in with this the power armor juggernaut suit, and he gives the speech and the cutscene where he's like falling, and he has these profound lines and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that a lot more. Also, just the mission, people say Watch Dogs 1 had a lot more villains, just too many villains, which yes, I can definitely see where you're coming from when you say that, but they felt like they had so much more weight than the villains from Watch Dogs 2. Just the whole scene with Lucky Quinn when you hack into his pacemaker and he's trying to be all poetic and stuff, and he's like, I came here to do a job, you're dead. And I really like that. I really like that scene. The only thing I think could have been done better as far as Watch Dogs 1 villains go is Damien. I think the whole, Jordy double cross, I kind of half expected that, just the type of person that Jordy is. Also, by the way, love Jordy. But anyways, off topic. The Damien ending was just kind of unsatisfying, to be honest. I like that they gave you the choice whether to kill or not kill Maurice at the end. I really like that. Now, with what the second game lacks in storyline and relatability, it makes up for an atmosphere. I love the atmosphere of the second game, just walking around San Francisco, hearing muffled Outkast and Daywave songs from cars that drive past you, hearing all the chatter from people living in a tech-based city, which, can I say that it actually feels like a city where there's a whole bunch of tech being implemented all at once, and I love the light, carefree attitude of the San Francisco DedSec, and the fact that it really shows when they're doing missions, like they're just spray painting and just putting their logo up everywhere, the music and just making a scene. I really like that. Just like I was talking about earlier with the mission where you break into Thrust's apartment and you can escape on a zip line that Wrench sets up, and it's really cool. All of their missions have this like comic book-esque flair to them, like they're just showing off, doing whatever. We're gonna take down Bloom. Some parts were a little like, when they went to Swelter Skelter, they're like, DedSec's a fraud. Let's go to Swelter Skelter and meet Raymond K. I think they could have done that a lot better. But I do like Ray. Ray's one of my favorite characters in the series. But yeah, for story, I'm probably gonna have to give this to Watch Dogs 1. Watch Dogs 1 just had the better overall story in general. At some points, it did feel like I was doing the same missions over and over again. Just walk in, hack into the server, and then leave. But they were fun. I loved how varied the Watch Dogs 1 story. It felt like an actual complete story. You go around the city taking down crime boss after crime boss, and you're taking down all these villains. And I know a lot of people don't like the towers to unlock certain districts, but I actually kind of like that because it reminded you that you're like progressing in the game. Okay, well, we moved on to the loop. Now we're in Pawnee. We got to go meet Raymond Kenny, and we got to go to the CTOS center. Like, hey, we're actually moving forward in the story. This is an actual journey. We're learning new information. We're gaining new allies. We're getting closer and closer to avenging Lena's death. But yeah, I definitely am gonna have to say Watch Dogs 1. I really cannot say enough good things about the story for Watch Dogs 1. So, in conclusion, I know some people are not going to like me for this, but to be honest, I think it depends on the type of person you are. I obviously love both games for different reasons, but just objectively, it kind of depends. If you're someone who came from like Call of Duty games and you saw Watch Dogs, I think you'd honestly like Watch Dogs 1 a lot more than Watch Dogs 2. But also, if you're coming from somewhere like GTA, I think you'll like Watch Dogs 2 a lot more. Personally, I've played so many hours in both games. I love them. I noticed this thing that happens where it's like my most recent played game is always my favorite game. So it's like I can't, and then I go back to the other game and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And then I go back to the other game, and it's just a cycle that repeats over and over again. I know I put Watch Dogs 1 in front of Watch Dogs 2 for my top 10 games of the decade, but I honestly, I love both games. I love them. They're like my favorite games. They're both 10 out of 10 games for me. But yeah, let me know you guys' opinions down in the comment section below. Which one do you guys like? I'd really like to hear that. We could have a discussion in the comment section. So yeah, until Legion, peace.